Little red dot.
There it is, it's flash.
Okay, we're on the air. It's June 3rd, 2017. I'm talking to Bernard, last name SHENAL, at his home in Port Charlotte, Florida. Bernie has agreed to talk to me for publication. Is that right, Bernie?
Yes.
My name is Don Moore. I'm a newspaper reporter with the Charlotte Sun Daily newspaper. I'm shooting this DVD for the Veterans History Project Library of Congress, and for notes that will be used to produce the story that appeared in the Charlotte Sun. Bernie, let's just start off with, where were you born?
I was born in McClellantown, Pennsylvania, which is a little town just about 50 miles south of Pittsburgh.
Okay. How old are you?
I'm 79 years old. I'll be 80 in November of this year.
Okay, what's your date of birth?
23 November 1937.
All right, so you must have gotten out about the time Elvis Presley, out of high school, about the time Elvis Presley was taken off.
He got in, yes.
And he got in, and he, I guess the record business for him started somewhere around 55 or 56, and then he really took off by 56, because I remember I was in Pennsylvania too, and a kid, I'm 2 years younger than you are, and he started making waves about 56.
Yes.
Okay, so what happened? You got out of high school and went in the service?
Yes, at the time of graduation in 1955, I went into the military.
Okay, Korean War's over.
Korean War's over. Within 6 months, I was sent to Germany. I first had basic training with the 101st Airborne. They were deactivated at that time. They weren't on jump status, but we were in basic training. After 8 weeks of basic training, they sent me to Fort Knox, Kentucky for armored training.
Okay.
From there, after 8 weeks of armored training, I was sent to Camp Stewart, Georgia, which right now is a large camp, but at that time everybody lived in tents.
Okay.
It was just out in the swamps.
In the sticks.
Yes, and everybody lived in tents.
Okay.
The only buildings were the office buildings.
Okay.
And I wanted out of there so bad
Okay.
that when we went down there, because I had a clerical job, they wanted somebody who could type. And I says, well, I know how. So I got into typing and everything. And there was two friends of mine, two brothers, Lapalato brothers from New York. They got a job in headquarters. And when the first allocations come down to send people overseas, they put our names on it. And people who were down there ahead of us that wanted to go overseas, they were really upset. But anyway, within 6 months, I was on my way to Europe.
Okay.
And I crossed the Atlantic. I was fortunate enough to go by boat. I wanted to go over by boat and possibly fly back. That way I would have...
All right, so what time of the year did you go across the Atlantic?
I went across the Atlantic in December.
That's not a good time to go across.
It's not a good time. We got to England, we stopped there, and we let off some troops in southern England, and we went up into the North Atlantic. And that was so rough. That ship was going up and down 20 and 30 feet. Nobody was allowed on deck. And fortunately for me, on a troop carrier ship, I was fortunate enough to be on a top bunk. So when these people were getting sick, they weren't
getting sick on somebody else.
They were getting sick on other
man,
people.
You must have had a sloppy boat.
Yes, and it was, as a matter of fact, it was the USNS Upshur that I went over. Upshur. That was the boat I went over. It was a United States Naval ship, Upshur.
Okay.
And that's they call it inclinator. There's two on every ship that they used to put.
Yeah,
once it goes something, but now they're only put on there for show.
Yeah.
But they don't mean nothing. But at that time, there was, and I got that, and I made that plaque to put it on there. You know.
That's pretty good.
And
all right, so you get to Germany.
We get to Germany. We landed in Bremerhaven, which was in the northern section of Germany. They sent us down to a military base for distribution, and I got sent from Bremerhaven. I got sent down to Baumholder, Germany, which was
how you spell?
Baumholder, Holder,
Okay.
which is one of the largest military camps in Europe at that time.
Okay.
They bought up 3 towns around there because they used to use them for military practice and shell practice. They were bombed out during the war
Yeah.
when we took that base over.
Yeah.
So we
Just took.
took it over, and the people never moved into this town.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, in addition to this, we were a regimental headquarters,
Okay.
Combat Command C. We also had division artillery from the 2nd Armored Division.
What was your unit?
My unit was headquarters Combat Command C. We only had officers, and the enlisted men were the drivers of the officers. Everybody worked in the headquarters. I was the supply sergeant. I issued all the equipment to everybody. We
Okay.
had our line companies. We had 4 battalions
Oh,
that
I don't
were
care
under
about
us.
that, but you're our Combat Command C, but what division and regiment and
Combat Command C of the 2nd Armored Division.
2nd Armored? Okay.
The 2nd Armored Division.
All right.
And like I say, we had as many officers as we did enlisted men.
All right, well,
Actually more.
What was Germany like? It's 10 years after the war.
It's 10 years after the war. We also, our tanks that we had were painted as nice as any car. This was a show, our helmet liners and everything.
A show outfit.
Yes. And our division artillery, based in Germany also, the only place in Germany, they had the 280 millimeter atomic cannon.
Oh, no kidding.
And this was used, I have pictures of this
Yeah. Okay.
thing. The projectiles were so big that the truck that carried the projectiles could only carry 6 shells. And it would carry the bags of powder. And this was an atomic firing weapon. And we were stationed there, and there was 3 regiments connected with 4 regiments, Combat Command, A, B, C, and Division Artillery. That made up the 2nd Armored Division.
All right. So what are you guys doing? I mean, you got atomic cannon, for Christ's sake. You can't use that. You got fancy painted up tanks.
They would fire on these towns with practice rounds, and the shells wouldn't explode. They were just loaded with,
Yeah.
looked like
Yeah.
slag or something. They would just hit and break or whatever,
Yeah.
you know. But we were in the American sector. You had the American sector, the British sector, and the Russian sector.
Okay.
This
This
is
all
how
part of the Berlin thing.
This was how Germany was divided.
Okay.
And we stayed in our sector, the British stayed in theirs,
Yeah.
the Russians stayed in there, but they would come across every now and again.
Yeah.
There was no man's land that
Right.
nobody got into.
Yeah.
And this was up around Berlin and everything.
Yeah.
Now, when I got to Germany in 1955, I was 17 years old. There were no men in Germany. This was a paradise for the American GI because he had money.
Yeah.
And there was girls.
Yeah.
Hitler had killed off all his men. The Hitler Youth, he killed them all off.
Yeah.
And what wasn't killed off, when the war ended, Russia come in and took all the men back to their
Yeah. And
work
most of them
camps.
didn't come back.
And most of them never come back. And there was all these, this was a
Beautiful
glory
blonde
day.
girls.
Beautiful women over there, and you just had a field day. So anyway, and I used to travel around. When I first got to Germany, you could ride the trains for free.
Yeah.
Everywhere we went, as we moved as a military company, we were always combat loaded and combat ready. You carried your ammunition. Everywhere I was ever sent to another camp, I carried my weapon with me, my ammunition.
All right. So you're over there. When does Elvis show up?
Well, this came at the end whenever I came back to the States.
Okay.
But anyway, we traveled, as I say, I traveled around Germany to see everything. And
As a tourist.
as
On
a tourist.
On a train.
As a train. I'd go to Frankfurt, wherever I could. Our
Well,
last,
I mean, you get off the train. You didn't speak Low German at home, did you?
I am of a Slavic descent,
Okay.
which was a Slovenian language, which was kind of Germanic. It was easy for me to pick up
it
the
up.
language, and I could understand, and I could get along pretty good with the people over there.
Okay.
You know, and we'd go up on field maneuvers, on border patrol.
Yeah.
We were on our side, the Russians were on their side. We had an officer who couldn't read a map, and if he was sitting in the Jeep and we were headed north, and he was holding a map, and the place we wanted to go was showed on a map on the left,
Yeah.
he would know to go up and make a left turn.
Yeah.
If he was headed south,
It was-
he's looking at that. Now that place is on the right. And I used to take the map
Yeah.
in his hand. I'd say, "Sir, let me show you something." And I'd take the map and turn it upside down in his hand. And he says, "What are you trying to be smart? Do you think I'm stupid?" And he would turn it back around. And we actually ended up in the East German, into a little town. And this German police officer who seen us, he was scared. We were in a Jeep, we had a machine gun on the back,
Yeah,
and everything else, a 30 caliber.
Well, you're by yourself in a damn Jeep with a 50 caliber.
Me and the officer and the driver.
Okay, was
And
that
we-
a 30 or a 50 caliber?
30 caliber. And we were just on,
in the Russian zone.
in the Russian zone. And we were just on field maneuver.
Yeah, yeah.
This was the last big field maneuver.
Yeah, and
They
he
called it,
made the wrong turn.
they called it field exercise final drive that the Second Army was going to make. And we end up into there. And this German police officer, he wanted us out of there, so I talked to him, and he told me where to go and get back, and I tried to explain to this officer that he should be looking at the map the other way. But anyway, we got back safe. We didn't get captured. I'd have still maybe been over there. But everything was fine and dandy. And shortly after that, Germany in the end of 1955 and 56 became a country. They got their sovereignty back. They were building an army. They loved the tanks because that's what defeated them, Patton and the tanks. So we give them all our M47 tanks.
Okay.
We were getting new tanks. We were giving them all our M47. And being in supply at the regimental headquarters, we took our battalion tanks and we were going to give to them. And the officer who was to sign them, the German officer, he come in there and I'm looking at him and I'm talking to him. He had one arm, he had an eye missing. And I was talking to him and I asked him, I says, "Were you in the German army prior, before?" I says, "You must have been in the German army." And he says, "Yes." He was a ME-262 jet pilot.
Oh my God.
Stationed in Munich. And the B-17s were coming over to bomb.
Yeah.
They went up to shoot them down.
Yeah.
He says, the only problem we had, we didn't have much fuel on board. We got one pass at the planes.
Yeah.
And by the time we'd turn around, they would be gone and we were out of fuel. Yeah. And he says, when he was taking off, he hit a shell crater, a bomb went off in front of him. That's where he lost his eye and his arm. Yeah. And I says, now you're in the German army. I says, what about the other men that's in there? He says, the ones that the Russian didn't get, that's who we also have in our army. And we signed over all our stuff that we give to him when we were getting new equipment. But it was quite interesting talking to him.
Yeah.
We used to go down to Garmisch and Berchtesgaden. I went to school in Langgries, Germany, to supply school. In Berchtesgaden and Garmisch, where Hitler had all his elite officers, he would bring down to his private headquarters and everything. We stayed in them hotels for like 25 cents a night because our government had taken them over.
Yeah.
And these lavish hotels and everything, and these lakes, and it was so beautiful down there.
Yeah.
And the military
Bavaria.
in Bavaria.
Yeah.
The military, which had a 5.5-day week.
Okay.
You'd usually work a half a day on Saturday. Down in that area, you had a 4.5-day week. Friday afternoon, you was off. They give us the benefits so we could tour around Bavaria and Berchtesgaden and Garmisch, and it was so close to the Australia, to the not Australia, Austria, to Langgries or to Salzburg, Austria, and we could travel around and do all this.
What was the? Apparently, they weren't too unhappy about the Americans over there.
No, not where we were.
Well, I guess because of the Russians.
The Russians weren't happy, but we were giving them money. Whenever there was a bad freeze, bad winter, and we kept the people alive. We were feeding them and everything else. And every half hour we'd start all our vehicles to keep these engines warm so they wouldn't freeze over. You didn't have proper antifreezes and everything at this time in the 50s. And while I was there, just unbeknownst to me, I bought my first car I ever bought, I was 17 years old, was a 37 Mercedes. and I could have had it shipped back to the States, which today would probably be worth $100,000.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I could have had it shipped back to the States because I went up into rank in E5 and the government would ship it back for free. And I says, where am I going to get parts for this car? There were no foreign cars in the United States then. So whenever I left and our whole outfit was coming back, there was nobody to buy it. I left it sitting in the parking lot in Germany. I paid $100 for it. It wasn't no
Yeah.
big deal. So I just left it sitting there. And I came back to the States. Now, I came back approximately 7 months before our outfit. They called it a gyroscope. The whole 2nd Armored Division was coming back to the States. The 3rd Armored Division was coming over to replace us. And this was going to be the last time they make a move like this. So anyway, I was sent back as advance party to check all the equipment that they had, to make sure they had everything on their property books. They sent representatives over here. So I go back to Fort Hood, Texas, where they were at. We're checking all their books and everything else, make sure they had all their equipment. And on March the 18th of 1958, who shows up but Elvis Presley?
You're at Fort Hood.
And I'm in Fort Hood, Texas now.
Okay, so, I mean, 58. I mean, by this time he's a big wheel.
Yes,
He's
yes.
He's an international.
As he was an international singer, I never cared that much for Elvis personally at that time. But after seeing him there, what little time I spent with him, he seemed like he was a genuine, nice person. Because he had nothing to do with my particular company, but he was in the next barracks. And in the evening, he would sing and play his guitar for the guys.
Okay, so what was he? He was a corporal or something?
He was a private then.
Private, yeah.
He was just going through basic training.
Okay.
And they wanted him to go into the USO,
Yeah.
which would tour around and entertain.
Yeah.
He didn't want to do that because I think his recording troupe or something figured he would be doing this and getting no money.
Yeah.
And they didn't want him doing that, so he stayed as a soldier.
Just as a soldier.
He did not go into the USO.
All right, so
around.
was he with 3rd Army or 3rd Armored?
3rd Armored Division. He was in basic training
At Fort Hood.
at Fort Hood, Texas. Now every day there would be 3 3/4-ton trucks just with his mail, his fan mail. Every day the mail trucks
What
would
the hell
come by.
did you do with it all?
Well, he probably threw it all away. He couldn't go through it all. He didn't have the time because he was taking his training. But these trucks would pull up just with his fan mail. And on post they had PXs, which is a post exchange, was kind of like our Walmarts today.
Yeah.
And we would, you'd go down there, they had stores and they had restaurants.
Yeah.
And whenever you would go into the restaurant, all the napkin holders on the table were gone. Because Elvis would come in, everybody's grabbing napkins. Give me an autograph, give me an autograph. And they were spewed all over the place and bothering him. So in the cafeterias, they would take the napkin holders off of there so people wouldn't be taking them and bugging him. And you had to go up and ask for a napkin, you know. And it was just funny. Who thinks of taking napkin holders off because Elvis was there?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And he went on through his training, and then, like I say, in April 17th, 1 month later, I was discharged from the military and went home, you know.
Okay.
But while I was in Germany, I traveled to Europe, I traveled to England, I traveled all over. I figured I want to see all this.
Yeah.
And in 1956, when the Hungarian War broke up, when
the Russians came in.
the Russians came in,
Yeah.
all our tanks, I say, were painted with big 2nd Armored Division crest. Everything was painted up beautiful.
Yeah.
Whenever Russia invaded Hungary, we had to paint everything with flat OD and everything else and move up onto the lines and get ready if this war started.
Yeah.
And it was just something else, you know, to go from a show company to a combat outfit.
Yeah.
But everywhere you went, you were always combat loaded, combat ready. You know, your guns were always loaded. We had all the fuel that we needed. As a matter of fact, when we give all these tanks to the Germans, excuse me,
They got a,
we had to supply them with fuel all the time because they didn't have enough gas. And they didn't have the facilities of making gas and getting gas. They had just became a country, you know, and their base was in Eder Oberstein, which is a little town outside of Baumholder, is where the German Panzer, it was a Panzer division, you know. But it was really great duty depending on how you wanted to look at it, you know. And I looked at it as a
well, I mean, you
chance
got to
to
be a
tour.
sergeant just because you could type.
Yes.
You know, I have heard so many stories of guys, well, anybody around here know how to type? You know, and the guy raises his hand, he said, you know, I went in and became a typist, clerk typist or whatever, and it saved my butt.
Well, it took me 13, because of being transferred around all the time, it took me 13 months to get my first stripe.
Okay.
12 months later, no, not even 12 months later, 10 months later, I was a staff sergeant. They waived my time for promotion. I was a supply clerk, and whenever our supply sergeant moved up to first sergeant, they moved me up to that position, and they give me the rank. The rank was open, so they signed a waiver to get me a special promotion to get me to staff sergeant. You know, at that time we had, they call them specialist second class, specialist third class, specialist first class. But at that time you only had 7 enlisted grades. Now you have 9.
Okay.
But you had 7 enlisted grades, and I was an E5. In 23 months, I was an E5. And I came back to the States, and I would have been up for promotion again, but there was only one I had to re-enlist, because I had to be in grade.
All right, so you were in for what, 3 years?
3 years.
Okay, and so you're 20 when you get back?
Yes.
Okay, so what the hell do you do then?
Well, I get out of the service. I went to California. Me and my cousin went to California. Prior to going to California, I seen an ad in the paper. I got a job with McCrory's 5 and 10.
Okay.
As a manager training.
Okay.
And they sent me to a...
Spell McCrory's for me.
McCrory. There was one in Fort Myers. Whenever I first came to Florida, there was still a McCrory's store in Fort Myers, and there's one in Immokalee that is out of business, but the name is still there. You know, and
so you're going to be management for...
I was management training, but I didn't like that job, and you were dealing with all the women that you had to work with in the store, and I thought they were going to send me to... I got out to Bethlehem, PA. I was working out there. My next move, I thought, was going to go to New York. I spent a summer in Atlantic City with them. Okay. And that was something else, working in Atlantic City. And because it was so expensive, the company picked up part of our rent and everything else, in addition to our pay. And I was only making $1.50 an hour.
Sure.
And they were going to send me to New York, and I just didn't get along good with them, so I quit.
Okay.
Me and a cousin went to California to look for work, and we spent about 2 months out there looking around, and I finally landed a job. My cousin didn't get one. He says he's going to hitchhike home or get a bus, because it was my car. I had a 59 retractable hardtop. The first... Yes, they came out in 57 with them.
Yeah.
I had a 59.
That had to be trouble. I mean, that retractable top.
I never had no problems with it.
Didn't have
it worked all the time. And
27 motors, for God's sake.
Yes. And what I did, I told him, I says, no, if you're going to go back, I'll just go back. So I came back. I had uncles that were school teachers in Pennsylvania. They had moved up to Ohio, up to Cleveland, and my one uncle was an industrial arts teacher. And he was teaching at the Ford Apprentice School, at Ford Motor Company. And he told me, why don't I sign up, go to Ford and sign up for the apprenticeship? And Ford will send me to school and they'll give me a job. So I went and signed up, but I had to take an entrance test. So And that depended on when they took you and how they put your name on the list.
Yeah.
You know, you could move ahead of anybody that's on there. So I went up there and I took the test. And I actually, when I got done with the test, I went back and made one answer wrong, so they didn't think I cheated.
Yeah.
That I got 100%. And I got so high, they hired me. They give me a job within the next month, and I started my apprenticeship. And people questioned how I got so high. They looked, nobody had a score like me. And here, a month before starting at Ford, when I was in California, I took a test at a place out there. It was exact same test that Ford gave us. That was a test that
Yeah.
all corporations give. And when I was done with the test out there, they went over the whole thing with me and told me all the correct answers. So I knew when I took that test, I could have done it blindfolded.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't look like I cheated. I changed one answer.
Yeah, yeah.
And they finally said okay, you know, that was fine. And
So you went to work for Ford?
I went to work for Ford Motor Company. I was a sheet metal mechanic, and when they started the environmental programs, I got involved in that. There was me and another guy were the first ones to get involved in environmental engineering and to clean up the air, because we were in a foundry and we had special equipment we had to clean up. And I spent 32 years with them. Most generally, I worked 7 days a week, because as a maintenance man, you were there when the plant run,
Right.
5 days, and you done your maintenance work on a weekend.
Right.
So I would be scheduled for the weekend, and everybody enjoyed that because
Yeah.
they were making big money. At the time I retired, in '92, we were making $2,500 a week.
Whew.
As
Wow.
that's the kind of money we were making.
And you were a maintenance. You were
A maintenance sheet metal worker, but
okay.
we were working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. And the way Ford was set up at the time, if you didn't have 8 hours between shifts, you got time and a half for the next shift. They didn't care. They were making money hand over fist. There was 14,000 people in that casting plant in Cleveland, Ohio. Today, there's 1,700. The casting plant is completely gone. There's only an engine plant there. Before, there was 2 engine plants and a foundry, and they cast all the blocks for Ford Motor and all the castings. And these guys, the guys who tended the cubilos, those guys, one guy wasn't home. Because they didn't hire anybody else, these guys wanted to work. He was on strictly time and a half. He was like 6 weeks, he never even went home. He stayed at the plant. They had a laborer. That used to clean the locker rooms. Now this guy, that's all he done was empty the trash cans, make sure there was towels and soap, and clean. And he was working 7 days a week. And he had close to $1 million because his wife told Ford, send his paycheck in there, we'll live off of mine. His paycheck went straight to the credit union. And he was working in there. His holiday pays, he would work. Now, whenever it was a holiday or a vacation, if you were on vacation and you didn't take your vacation and you worked, you were getting double time, because you got paid for your holiday and you're getting paid for the day. And this guy had close to $1 million. He was a laborer. He could hardly speak English.
Yeah.
You know, and he was a black guy from Alabama. I knew him well, J.C. Harding.
Yeah.
And he would be around there. And one day, one of the presidents of Ford Motor Company came down and was doing a walk through our plant. We had that plant spotless for this guy. And he was doing a walkthrough, and there's JC sitting in the locker room. And they come walking through there, and they looked down, and there he was sitting there. And they looked at that, and they thought, oh my God, here this guy is just sitting in a locker room, and here's the president walking by of Ford Motor Company, the executive officer. And he stopped, and he asked JC, he says, JC, what do you do around here? He says, you see all these locker rooms? He says, I keep them clean. I put the soap in there, and I put the towels, and I keep everything nice and clean. And the president looked at him and says, it seems like you got a pretty good job. He says, yes, I do. And he turned to walk away, and JC says, well, what do you do? Because he didn't know who he was talking
Yeah,
to. And the guy says, well, I'm the president of Ford Motor Company, the CEO of Ford Motor Company. And he says, you got a good job too if you don't screw it up. And everybody, they just put their hands up. And that was a big thing. And J.C. Hardy, I asked him, I says, J.C., what are you going to do when you retire? He says, well, I'm going to stay as long as I can. He says, but I got a big farm down in Alabama. I says, yeah. He says, I raise chickens and cows. I says, J.C., you're up here. Who does it? I says, you're in your 70s. I says, who's down here taking care of your chickens and cows? He says, his mama. You know, but he was a great, great man, you know, and everybody knew him because he was a fixture.
Yeah.
He was there and everybody knew him.
Yeah.
And everybody, the plant manager and everybody knew him and
Yeah.
they would talk to him. All our plant managers, everybody at Ford Motor Company there kind of came up through the ranks. The plant manager used to work down there.
Yeah.
The superintendents were regular workers and they got promoted. And it was just like a family organization. And they treated us very well, and we done them, you know, we worked very well. But like I say, because of the demand now, Ford had a plant in Canada at Windsor. They had an engine plant up there. They would have labor problems, or their plant would break down. Where would they go? They would shift the work down to ours, and we'd pick it up. So those guys were casting 7 days a week. The line workers were working 7 days
Okay,
a
well,
week.
you give me enough of that. What, when did you come here? When you retired in
92.
Okay, when did you come here?
I came here at that time.
92.
Exactly. I built the house.
Yeah.
I had it started in 91.
Yeah.
And we had the house built. I signed with the builder. I trusted this guy.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I went and I signed all. I took a construction loan.
Right.
And anytime this guy needed money, I would write him a check and send it out. You know, I didn't believe that he was going to cheat me or something.
Yeah.
You know, one guy tried to get me to put the lot in his name because I couldn't get money. Living in Cleveland, a bank down here would not loan me money because I didn't have money in that bank or live in this area. So this one guy wanted me to put the lot in his name.
Yeah.
He would draw the money, he would get a bank loan and make it an assumable mortgage, and he would have the house built, and when it's built, he would let me assume the mortgage from him. But what if he didn't? And what if it fell through? You know, I didn't do that. But for some reason, I trusted this builder.
And he worked for you.
And it worked, and he came out. When the house was completed in December, it was completed, he told me to come down to sign the final papers so they can draw the balance of the money and everybody gets paid. I says, I can't come down until January because of my wife's job.
Yeah.
So he says, we want to get this matter taken care of.
Yeah.
So I had the papers all notarized up there and signed it like I accepted everything else.
Yeah.
So he could go to the bank and get his money, and the house was paid off and everything else, and I never even seen
saw the
it.
damn thing.
And when I came down,
Yeah.
he took me over
Yeah.
to the house and he says, here's your house, all complete.
Yeah.
And for the first 6 months or so, we were still in transient back and forth. And he told me, if you let me keep a key, I will maintain your lawn and your swimming pool.
Yeah.
If you let me keep a key to the house, that if somebody wants to look at this model, I will take them in there, but I won't let people just walk through. I will personally take them in and out.
Yeah.
And we did this for him.
Yeah.
And whenever he would bring, after we moved in, and he would call us and say, I want to bring some people through, he would write us a check for $100 just for letting people look at the house. I mean, this is how honest this guy was.
Yeah.
You know, and
All right, well, so give me your wife's first name.
Laura.
Laura. How about kids?
Well, I have 2 children. I was married before. She was married before.
Okay.
And her children are up in Ohio.
Laura, can you give me all their first names?
There's Bill.
Okay.
There's Carr.
Okay.
And there's Johnny.
Okay, Bill, Carr, and John.
Yeah. Oh, no, sorry. Rick. Rick.
Bill, Rick,
And Carr, yeah.
Car. C-A-R.
Carlana, yeah.
C-A-R.
Carlana's her name. We
Okay.
call her Car.
Or Carlotta.
Carlana.
Spell.
Carlania. Carlana.
Okay, so you got 2 boys and a girl.
We got, yes, Robert. We got, Rick is Richard, I guess,
Yeah.
and Carlana.
Okay.
And,
All right.
and I have 2 children, Richard and my daughter, Shelley.
Shelley.
Yes.
Okay. S-H-E-L-L-I-E.
Well, Shely.
Okay. All right. All right. What other things on the Presley thing? What you remember anything? You said he would play his guitar for the guys at the barracks.
Yes.
And-
He'd come out on the back and sing and play the guitar and.
Okay. And what kind of response? I mean, all the guys at the barracks were.
Oh yeah, they were all sitting there listening to him. And,
Well, I mean, how did they? I mean, he's a private. How did the platoon sergeant and
well, this was on their free time, you know. The
yeah,
platoon
I
sergeant had
know that,
nothing-
but I mean, you know, like when he got along with the
Yes, but through the other times he was doing his
yeah
military training, and
Yeah.
in the evening that was his time.
yeah
You know, and on the weekends, you know, he had a half a day Saturday and
Yeah.
Sunday,
yeah
and he would go around, go into town.
yeah
There, it seems to me that there was 2 other guys that he buddied up with mostly.
yeah
You know, that he was always
In
hanging
his
around
unit.
with. Yeah.
in his company or whatever. Platoon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Well, that's pretty good. You got 36 minutes.
Yeah.
So
And the only other thing that I have military-wise is what I told you. When I moved down here, across the street, there was a guy named Eddie Edwards. He passed away at 92.
yeah.
He went into the prison camp of Auschwitz and Birkenau.
You got those pictures?
Yes.
Well, all right, wait, hang on for a minute. We're going to go off the air with that. We've got 37 minutes, 15 seconds.